Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
Read the best, and hope for the best.
Vekoma broke well on the outside, and
But you don't expect to get speed like this.
Inside, Vekoma continues to battle on down the rail. It is Vekoma who's going to win the Met Mile.
Buongiorno, everybody, and welcome to Saratoga Today, Saturday on Past the Wire TV. Hopefully this Saturday, the second Saturday of the meet, goes as good as the first one when Dawn Lupul nailed most strike in the Sanford and started off the meet white hot for all of us. Before we get to that, thanks to the best videographer on the grounds, Jim Gazzale, up at Saratoga with behind-the-scene footage. We've got a little insight from Saffie Joseph today on the type of horses he brought to Saratoga this year as opposed to last year when he had somewhat of a tough meet. He's already off the mark at the spot this year, so obviously it worked already, and there's a long way to go, and he's got plenty to run. We'll also get a little glimpse into some training, watching Saffie's horses on the track, and in the shed row, and a little nice behind-the-scenes look on the backstretch at Saratoga, which is a real treat, especially for those of you who are not up there and have never been on the backside. So enjoy this little treat before Dawn and I are back with our observations on Saturday's card. So thanks for tuning in. Be back in a minute.
I think mainly more stake horses this year. We kind of spread it out a bit more diverse. So last year we were kind of top heavy. We're not really any bottom or middle. This year we kind of diversed it a bit in that aspect, but it's obviously good to get off the mark quickly, and hopefully we can win a few more.
You have to go 6 or a mile and a half. You're going to Vamos a meter todo el conocimiento. ¿Qué llama mi champion?
Okay, everybody, thank you for tuning in to Saratoga Today, Saturday, week 2. Dawn was hot last week, as I said, when we led into that little Saffie Joseph snippet that I hope you all enjoyed. But we're back for week 2. Dawn, what do you think?
I think week 1, week 2, every week at Saratoga is amazing. It's getting hot down there, so that's something to think about. You know, people always ask me about body language because I am very good at, reading horses' body language. It's a skill that you need to apply when you're watching the races. I can't tell you in advance who's going to do well or not.
Right.
But watch the horses. If they look uncomfortable, it's going to be really, really hot Saturday, Sunday. So if they look uncomfortable on the track, they may not run their best. It's just like some people hate the heat and some love it. Horses are the same way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I always look for a horse that looks like they're really, too hot or just too worked up. It only really hurt me one time, but I never forgot it. I'll never forget Shackelford before the Preakness looked so bad. He was washed out. He was terrible. I remember looking at him and saying, this horse has no chance today. He looks terrible. And he went and won, So, I mean, horses humble everybody at some point, but that's the only time that really comes to mind where one just totally fooled me based on, observations. And I think you're right. I think at Saratoga, when it gets really hot like this, or anywhere for that matter, you got to watch for a horse that's not handling it, that you might be thinking of betting on, because you can save yourself money more often than not. Before we get into the card, I said we would talk about different angles and different observations during the course of the meeting this show. There's one thing I think is worth mentioning when it comes to riding. I think the riding has been phenomenal, very, very competitive. Really, really guys getting down and really, putting their best forward, which you see at Saratoga. But one observation I had, and the guy's riding great, so I'm not knocking the way he's riding, but when it comes to Flavien Prat, a lot of people thought he was going to move here and kind of dominate, the New York and Saratoga colonies the way that he did in California. And I think he's riding very well. He's winning his share of races, but he's certainly not dominating, and I think that just goes to the strength and competitiveness of the Saratoga colony, how everybody kind of takes up their game a notch. And it's just a little bit more difficult. And, Flavien's a great rider. I don't see a weakness or a flaw in his riding, but, riding 3 to 5 shots in 5-horse fields in California, on, half the card every day is a little different than coming to Saratoga and competing amongst, outfits that are pointing for that meet and trying to win every race like it's the Kentucky Derby, just because everybody wants to get a win in Saratoga, and not being on a 3 to 5 shot. every race, where you can't really go wide or make a mistake or wait too long or move too soon and overcome that. You've kind of got to be spot on. So he's riding great. He's getting his winners. I mean, he could, win the meet for all I know. And I'm not knocking him in any way, but he's not dominating like he did out west.
No, and there have actually been a couple of his rides where, and he's going to learn quickly because he's an extremely good jockey, obviously, but he's been a little tentative on some of them, especially on the turf. He's gotten himself a little bit too far out of position and it's cost him a victory. So he'll figure it out. You just can't, when the turf gets really, really hard, obviously we all tend to think that it will favor speed. The rain that we had this week was welcome. You need that rain because it just makes the turf more fair, but Pratt will figure it out. He's an exceptionally talented young jockey.
No, I agree. And, it's interesting that you said it, because another observation that I've made about riders over the years is, everybody thinks it's great when you've got a bond like Todd Pletcher or Chad Brown or, one of those powerhouse stables that you're riding for regularly. And you ride a lot of Cadillacs, that tends, and I've noticed riders that wind up in that groove, that tends to make a rider, in my opinion, a little overconfident. And they kind of ride every horse like they're a Cadillac, Now, Chad's horses, a lot of times on the turf, you can let everybody go swing to the outside for the run home and you're going to blow past them all regardless, But when you start riding every horse that way, you wind up coming second and third and fourth and second and third and fourth on races that you might have won had you been a little bit more, focused and aggressive and not thinking that, hey, everything I'm on is a Maserati and I'm going to be able to, inhale everybody in the stretch. So, as great as it is to ride all of those type of horses, you've got to remember that every horse is not that kind of horse.
Yeah, it's the competition level at Saratoga, I think, helps that though, because they're so competitive. Like Saez wants to win again. Obviously, Irad and Jose are riding extremely well. And even Dylan, he had a great day on.
He did. He started a little slow. He finally got a win, and then he kind of rolled it over. And it was nice to see because he had that great Belmont where he almost won the meet, which I thought was huge for him. And it's nice to see him maintain that continuity into a meet like Saratoga.
Absolutely.
I love when fresh-faced riders, kind of elevate their game and move into that next tier that you see. And Dylan certainly looks like he's on his way to doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're going to talk about some races here on Saturday. So, of course, we have to remember that the Haskell is happening to Monmouth. So some of our riders are out of town and won't be at Saratoga. So if you're wondering about jockey changes, that would be why.
The Haskell, to me, this year is probably one of the most intriguing races to watch. Not necessarily bet, because I think it's going to be very difficult to beat the two top choices. Jack Christopher or Tyba. I lean to the thought process that one of them is going to win, unless somehow they hook up and maybe Cyberknife sits a trip and somehow beats them. But I really doubt it, because to me, those are two horses that both have the potential to really be stars going forward.
Yeah, you have to remember, not those races, they're not always good betting races, but they're definitely must watch.
Right, exactly. Right. I'm probably as excited to watch the Haskell as any race this weekend, and I'm probably not going to bet on it. I might bet pick 4 or pick 5 or something, but I'm certainly not going to bet it as an individual race. But I'm as excited to watch it as any race. And, the 3-year-old championship is completely up for grabs. I mean, that's far from having been decided. So I think this is the first step, that race, and then the Travers and the Pennsylvania Derby, and we'll see if any of these 3-year-olds wind up in the Classic or any of the Breeders' Cup races. But very, very interested to see that race. I'm very curious to see how Jack Christopher handles 2 turns. If I was Jose Ortiz, my strategy would be, I'm coming out of that sprint. I've got the fastest horse. I think flat out fastest horse, all things being equal. I would put him on the lead and say, come catch me if you can, and see what happens. I don't know that that's going to be their strategy. They may want to play the break and see how it goes. They may have other races down the line, you know, in their mind, so they want to know that their horse can sit or something like that. But to me, it's $1 million. It's the Haskell. I'd say, let me win it, and I just say, come catch me if you can, and put him on the lead. But we'll see.
We'll see. That's good strategy too. We all know Monmouth and how it's
Yeah.
favors a lot of the time. So yeah,
Right.
good.
And
good strategy.
it might be very hot there on Saturday.
will
That
be,
might
for
be a
sure.
factor, you know,
Yes.
you know, like it is everywhere else. What do you think of the card at Saratoga? I had 3 races that I was looking at.
I'm in.
Okay.
I'm in.
First race I was looking at was early on the card, was the 3rd race, and a horse caught my eye. And because he's not the favorite, I'm going to have to say that it makes the 6 horse Repealing what I would call a vulnerable favorite. That horse is 7-5 on the morning line.
Mhm.
We've all seen this so many times. Okay. They win the maiden with a big number and what looks like a fast, outstanding race, and they get bet back against winners next time out. And, you know, more often than not, first time against winners, they can't repeat that race unless they're a really good or special kind of horse, or just really get the right setup or the right field. 2 things to me go against Repealing. One is that first time winners off that big race angle. The other is the horse ran at Saratoga already once and didn't run that well. So you know, those are 2 knocks in my opinion on a horse that's going to be, you know, 7-5, 6-5, maybe even money off that race. The horse that kind of caught my eye was Jane Grey, who did win at Saratoga 2 years ago, 2020. Okay. A Godolphin horse that they obviously, you know, into Mischief Filly, that they brought back after 2 years. Why would Godolphin bring a horse back after 2 years? Obviously, there was probably some kind of surgery or some kind of major setback. Okay. But they still brought her back. And that tells me that they probably think at some point she's going to be a stake horse. Why else bring her back? I mean, they breed everything, you know. You know, I've got to think they think that she can make a lot of noise. Her first race back off that layoff, she was on the inside. She wound up chasing. That's never a position that I like to see a horse in. I always think it's an uncomfortable spot for a horse, especially a horse that's had a setback or an injury and is coming back off a layoff. I think it's much easier for them if they're drawn outside and they could stalk. And she still ran a game race. Gets Luis Saez, 2nd time off that long layoff. 1 for 1 at Saratoga. I think she takes a big step forward and runs a big race on Saturday.
Yeah. So, you know, well, we'll talk about my Dawn's notes later, my sheet.
Okay.
So pointing out the vulnerable favorites, right? And so she is one. Repealing is definitely one of the vulnerable faves on the card on Saturday. That's a tough class move. It just is. When you win your maiden, for all the reasons that you stated, and you step into allowance for the first time, because you are facing horses who, for the most part, have been there. And, you know, sometimes it takes 1 or 2, unless if you're exceptional, you can roll through, or the fields are weak. Usually later in the year, you'll see a horse winning a maiden and then come and win an allowance. Because by that time, all the good horses have won their conditions and they're running in stakes, right? So like you get around October, November, that's when you jump on these last out maiden winners, but not in the summer at Saratoga. Alstall, who I enjoy betting his horses, but he just doesn't win that many races at Saratoga. It's a tough place to win. So that's something that I noted. The class move is tough. In allowance races at Saratoga, Alstall is 1 for 19. So, right. You know, it doesn't inspire a ton of confidence with Repealing at a short price. I do like your horse, Jane Grey. I mean, she just needs to improve it. We know how Bill Mott brings these horses back. They start back slowly. The first start is like, get her out there, get her back into racing mode. He's never one to rush a young horse or a horse off of a layoff. So I think she fits the profile perfectly. There's 2 in there I like too. The 4 Breakfast at Bonnie's did not really run that well last time. So she's a little tough to love, but she has early speed. And if she can show it again, maybe she didn't handle the surface last time, but she keeps having these breaks in her campaign, which is never a good sign. But she could pop up with a big one. Awesome Indra is probably the horse I like the best in there. The 2 horse Awesome Indra, 10 to 1 on the morning line. She's fast too. So if Bonnie isn't what she was and she runs like she did last time, Indra could take off on this field and just never look back.
I agree with that. You know, and it's interesting. They say great minds think alike, because the 2 other horses that I looked at were Awesome Indra and Breakfast at Bonnie's. And I wound up going to Jane Grey, and here's why. I like the fact that Breakfast at Bonnie's was 1-for-1 at Saratoga, like Jane Grey is. I like horses that win at Saratoga to win again. In my opinion, it's one of the strongest horse-for-course racetracks in the country. But the race that she won was kind of off the turf, wet track race, and I'm like, it wasn't that much. I think Jane Grey is more likely to go forward. The horse I feared more was the one you mentioned, and she's the perfect kind of horse that I usually like to bet in races like this, where you have a maiden that's going to be a maiden winner, a heavy favorite against a salty, multiple time winner, even in these open claiming races like she is. I just thought that, maybe Jane Grey is going to move forward, but I agree 100%. If she doesn't, then Awesome Indra is probably, in my opinion, the horse to beat. And I think that's an interesting race. Now, the vulnerable favorite that we talked about last week, and I apologize for not remembering the horse's name. It was the Chad Brown Drop Down. Looked beat every step of the way except the last 70 yards, if you remember.
Oh, yeah, the one you and I both didn't like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like she was struggling and, having a hard time getting over the track and climbing, and Turn of Home kind of looked like gave up, packed it in, and was on the outside. I thought it was going to be a plug along third or fourth. And then the last 70 yards just found that other gear, which that class drop sometimes will make happen, and just got up. But I'm like, we kind of had the right idea, but and was about 4 to 5 or something like that. So
yeah, those are the ones we're going to target. I mean, you're not, of course, some of them are going to win. They're 4 to 5 for a reason in those fields, but you're not going to make money in this game playing those ones, unless if it's like an absolute anchor in a pick 6 or pick 5 where you have bombs in the other legs. Because if you're taking that as an anchor, as a single, everyone else is too. So now you basically just reduce the ticket down. It was a pick 6, now it's a pick 5. It was a pick 5, now it's a pick 4. So making money on it gets tougher. But no, we will relentlessly attack those horses, especially Chad Browns, because they are being way overbet.
That's a problem with his horses, and certain other trainers too at times, and certain riders as well. Once they get hot, they get that, following. The Coaching Club American Oaks was another race I looked at because everybody's talking about it like it's a 2-horse race. And I love looking for stabs or shots or angles in races like that. Unfortunately, this is a really small field. They put it as the 5th race instead of the feature later on the card. I guess they were discouraged about the size of the field as well. But when I looked at this, I said, you've got 2 horses that are gonna really take all the money, and I don't even know who's going to wind up the favorite, whether it's going to be Secret Oath or Nest at post time. I think that can kind of flip flop either way, and obviously either one can win, and they both are very, very nice fillies. But maybe they can both be vulnerable on Saturday, and I'll tell you why. Nest is coming out of a 1.5-mile race where she didn't have the best trip and ran really, really big. Ran big in the Oaks, another trip that I didn't think was ideal before that. Now cuts back to 1.125 miles and is going to be coming from off the pace in a very small field, off a couple of hard races. Sometimes the horse is vulnerable, in my opinion, off a couple of hard races, especially on a very hot day.
Especially young fillies.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Now you've got Secret Oath, who was explosive in the Kentucky Oaks. She did go wide, but I thought she had an ideal trip. Sometimes going wide when you have a lot of momentum is not as bad as being in traffic or having to weave or stop or something like that. I thought she had a good trip. I didn't really think she had much of an excuse in the Preakness, but it was against males. But now she's off a little bit of a layoff. She goes to Saratoga, and she winds up again in a situation where she's going to have to come off the pace in a small field. And a horse that caught my eye when you look, and granted, she may get inhaled when they turn for home, but who runs with Society? I think she's alone on the lead. I don't think anybody's going to run with her. She's Steve Asmussen horse. She's a gun runner filly. She's got Tyler Gaffleone in the saddle on a hot day in a small field, going 1.125 miles in Saratoga against two fillies who may or may not be ready for their best race. I don't know. They may both be looking at the Alabama in a couple of weeks. I don't know if they are or they're not. I think there are worse stabs to take than Society on the lead in a small field against these two fillies. And I get it. A lot of people are going to say I'm nuts and it's 2-horse racing. And I could see that. I could see her getting inhaled. Absolutely. But I could also see her fooling everybody at 8, 9, 10 to 1 and just forgetting to stop. Lone Speed, on the lead, Speed is always dangerous. Steve Asmussen is always dangerous. Tyler can put in a heck of a ride. He's a strong finisher. He'll stay with her the whole way if she's in there at all. And last time she looked collared and she dug in and fought, not against this caliber of horse, but maybe a race like that gives a filly like this a little confidence in her next start. And if she's out there alone, maybe gets brave. Am I crazy?
Yeah, you're good. Well, there's a couple things there we have to. First of all, people are going to think you're nuts no matter what. So we'll just, there's that.
Right.
I looked at her for a long time. Now her down was pretty sprinty. It seemed like anytime she got to a mile, it didn't work out. So she kept to shorter distances, but she does have a half brother who could certainly go, the mile and the 16th. There's the gun runner does kind of influence her to be able to go further. She has to step up a whole lot, but that's what these young fillies can do. They can just all of a sudden put it all together. Some of them are late maturing physically. Maybe that's just what she was. She hasn't run a lot. So I would suspect that she's got that kind of frame that it's just needed her a while to get where she is. She hasn't done anything wrong. So I'm not going to fault her at all. I do like Secret Oath perhaps a touch better than Nest, only because she's a bit of an unknown. There's a change there. I like change. Finally, D. Wayne gave her some time off. I mean, this is a filly who has raced every 30, 45 days since she started running as a 2-year-old, and he's finally freshened her. So she may come back bigger, stronger, faster. She's dangerous off of that freshening just because it's the first time he's actually given her a break.
No argument. No argument. Like I said, it was more of a stab than anything else. But I thought it was an interesting kind of stab that'll at least give me a thrill into the far turn. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll have the lead into the far turn. If somebody moves early and goes after early, it may be over at that point, or maybe turning for home. But like you said, you just never know. These fillies do make big forward moves, and the scenario tells me it's not impossible. Not impossible. So
nothing's impossible.
And the price will be right. I mean, she'll be 10 to 1, so
for sure.
You got an undefeated filly alone on the lead at 10 to 1, coming out of a good barn. Pace and trip, I always say, makes a lot of these races, and she's got an advantage in both of those departments. So she'll have to step up and prove she's good enough to capitalize on it. But I think it's worth at least considering.
If you're playing one of the multis, that's the anchor leg of a couple of them, the pick 4, the pick 5, and it's in the pick 6, and you get those other two fillies beat in that leg, you're standing alone in a short field with a ticket that a lot of people wouldn't have, because everybody in the multis is going to key on either Secret Oath or Nest. I mean, you have to take a stance. So yeah, if you can get that one home, then
and the really smart people are going to have both and think, oh, I got this race locked up.
Absolutely.
If you can beat them, you've got 90% of the pool gone.
That's but she needs to step up. There's no doubt. But
no doubt, right? It would be a big step up, and I see that it would be a big step up. You know what I mean? Not even a little step up, but it is Saratoga, the graveyard of champions, and when you want to make those big scores, sometimes you gotta take a shot.
You have to be the contrarian. You have to. Yes.
Right. And 95% of the people or more think that's a 2-horse race, and they could be right, but I'll go with the minority.
You'll stand alone.
I'll stand alone. I've done it before.
I'll stand with you if you're lonely.
I'm alone, not lonely.
Yeah.
I've done it before. So You know, there's a horse run in the 10th race, which I think is a really competitive race. But I made some notes on the horse last time out. She did run a good second, but my notes were, and it's not something that a lot of people would really pick up on or put in their notes, was that she was never really in a comfortable position. She was inside between horses. Rider looked like he, had a horse and was looking for somewhere to go and waiting for a scene that just never really developed until the race was practically over. And that's number 3, Star Divine. I thought she really got a rough trip that doesn't really show in the past performances. You'd have to watch the replay and just focus on her to kind of see it. But she was never really comfortable and never had a chance to do her best. I think with a better trip, she can make a lot of noise in that race on Saturday. I do wish she was drawn outside, because she's drawn inside again, and a similar trip is certainly not impossible, because you've got to play the hand you're dealt. But I think she's an improving filly. I think she's got more in there to show, and I think with a better trip, she can be very dangerous.
Yeah, she's definitely not impossible. The Caress is I think it's a sensational race. So you've got Caravel on the inside, who is morning line phase. She is one I pointed out as being vulnerable for Saturday's card. Just for a lot of reasons. She's got to deal with the inside post position. With a filly with speed, you think, oh, that's a mare with speed. You think, oh, that's a good thing. Well, not necessarily, because you have to be used early to maintain that position. There's others on the outside who probably are going to keep her quite honest early on. I thought she got a perfect setup in her last race. Somehow she was alone in front. A whole bunch of them got into trouble. That race is worth watching about 10 times to focus in on different horses. Miss J Mckay, who's the 2, it looks like her, if you look at on paper, her last race looks kind of horrible, but it just never worked out for her. The trip was just diseased from the beginning. Of course, she had post 11 of 11, so she was up against it right off the bat, but she was wide, she was in, and then when she was down the stretch, when she needed to move forward, suddenly Joester, who returned to win her next start, came and kind of, I don't know that she ever actually hit her down the stretch, but she definitely jumped in front of her, and you could see Miss J Mckay was intimidated by all of a sudden this thing comes from her left. You could see her actually kind of go like that, like shy away. So I thought she was up against it from the minute the post position draw happened, and it, of course, after that, it was a disaster. Bout Time is one that I'm looking at in there. Did you take a peek at the 4 Bout Time for Sherry DeVoe?
I certainly did.
Yeah, Sherry DeVoe, she's winning with a lot of these horses. She's been having some really good success in stake races. This is a 4-year-old. She's, hasn't run that many times. She's just learning her lessons and going on in every race. Basically, she's taking a little move forward. I'm glad that they put her in here, because I think she deserves a chance to dance with the big ladies. And then the 5 Toby's Heart was the other one I was looking at as probably the best finisher in the field, who I thought was up against it too a little bit in her last race.
Right, who also happens to like Saratoga. About Time I looked at long and hard. I love the jockey switch. I love, everything you said about her. I thought, she's going to get a lot of money, and I'm going to tell her, prove it to me. Prove that you can beat these horses. Toby's Heart, I definitely can see. And Miss J Mckay would probably be my second choice to Star Divine, who I think is, like I said, is sitting on a big race on Saturday. But interesting. I think it's a really good race, and there's a lot of ways that you can go in there for sure.
Like Caravel, she won this race last year, right?
Yeah.
She was a favorite. She went out and won. She had a perfect trip. Irad had her in position, laid back, didn't even need the lead, and then came out and just, she won. She was good. She's obviously 1 for 1 at Saratoga because of that, and she loves the distance. There's a lot to like about her, but at a shortish price, if she is 5-2, to me, this race is too wide open, and I think she's actually regressed a little bit as a 5-year-old now. I don't think she's quite as strong as she has been. She's done a lot of winning in her career, so she knows how to win, but I'm not sure that she's the same mare that she was last year.
No, I agree. And I'll tell you something else that I do in these races. I'll mention another horse only because she's 30-1. And I like to mention horses like this. And when I was playing pick sixes regularly and playing them hard, this is actually the kind of horse that I would never leave out in a race like this because it was too much of a question mark. But if you look at the 10 Fouet, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, here you've got a filly who's coming off a nice win. She's feeling good. She's on top of her game, and she's moving into what looks like a ridiculous spot, first time on the turf in a race like this. Okay. And most people would toss her automatically because it's a big ask, you know. When I was playing pick sixes, especially if there was a big carrier, this is the kind of horse I would never leave out and beat me because it's just too much of a question mark. You know, I can be sure or at least feel relatively confident about all the horses that I'm using or not using that have run on the surface. But when you have a horse like this that's never been on the surface, breeding aside, which she's not really bred bad for the turf, doesn't jump out at you, but too much of a question mark for me to ever get beat by in a pick six or a big multi-race wager. And believe it or not, over the years, I've caught horses like this where I'm using a horse like this, and a friend of mine will say something like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Wow, it's turf. You never know. I don't want to let her beat me. It's a question mark. But it brings the price of the ticket up so much." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. But if she wins, doesn't matter. And if 1 out of 10 of them win, it doesn't matter."
No, you know what? With Lescano too, he burned me a few times on Wednesday because he's a rider nobody's going to be talking about. But if you go back and you look at the replays on Wednesday, just find every race that Lescano was in, he had every single horse in the right position.
Right.
Even though he didn't win them all, I think he won one or whatever. But he was finishing top 3 because he was so honed in. He's dialed in right now. She has a bit of a wide draw. She does seem like she wants to be front running, although she has won from sitting just off the pace before. So he does have some options. If she takes to the grass, then yeah, you could be onto something. And like you said, you have to think outside the box if you want to cash those,
I mean,
$200,000 tickets.
Right. You just never know. I mean, she's, Nyquist was by Uncle Mo. I think Uncle Mo can run on anything. Unbridled Song has, produced enough grass, winners down the line, through broodmares and whatnot that, it's okay for me. I mean, again, like that other horse, there's worse stabs in my opinion. So if I wind up betting a pick 4, pick 5, or, like last week, there was the carryover or a pick 6, I throw a horse like this in every time, every time. When a horse is trying something new, like turf, something like this, and has this kind of past performance where she's coming in on top of her game and trying to turf, they got to look really bad or really hopeless for me not to throw them in. And she doesn't look that bad or hopeless, that I wouldn't throw her in. So that's, just a long shot horse that I would use in those multi-race wagers. So we'll see how Saturday plays out. Last week, you were right on target with Most Strike in the Sanford, ran really, really big. And I think likely to be the favorite or one of the favorites in the hopeful.
He was impressive. It's just watching. That's my favorite thing, is watching these young horses develop and watching how they move and the strides and stuff. There was one yesterday that Belmont debuted. Obviously, everybody will be talking about it. The Frank's Roquette sister, the Roquette horse in the last race. Like when you watch a horse, even if you're not one who thinks you're good at watching body language, you learn quickly by watching good horses run. And if you watch the way that she was moving down the stretch, you just see it. It was so fluid. Like she's got a big future ahead of her. And he actually, she was entered for turf, right? He actually thinks she might be better on the grass, which I found interesting because her pedigree doesn't really support that. But it's Bill Mott, who's going to argue. So yeah, there's some, Most Strike was impressive. I like those kind of movers, very athletic, very professional. And if you catch those ones early, you can make some good money on them.
No doubt. It was 7 or 8 to 1 last Saturday. Yeah. I think we went 7 or 8 to 1. And Mott's horse yesterday, I always like a horse that when you watch the race, as soon as you pick up on the horse, you knew she was going to win. You knew, I mean, you just, as soon as she came into the video, you're like, oh, there's the winner right there. She was going to run past everybody, no matter who else was showing up or doing what. And I always like to watch races like that. So I guess that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. It's exciting. And Saratoga has not disappointed thus far as we continue on. The weather has been pretty good. Again, the heat is the issue this weekend, but in terms of getting washed off the turf, it's been really fortunate. Even the 2 races that were taken off on Thursday it was a little annoying because we lost some horses that I wanted to beat who were going to be over bet. Joe St. Louis or whatever Chad's horse's name is. That one I just was so looking forward to bet against, but they will reappear as a vulnerable favorite, and we'll get them.
I agree. And now, you know, we touched on Haskell. Del Mar is going to be running too. So it's always like, you know, a little bit of paradise. You got Saratoga in the day, Del Mar in the evening for us over on the East Coast. So it's fun summer days in horse racing for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to watching the Haskell on Saturday. Looking forward to betting this Saratoga card because I think there's a lot of vulnerable favorites on this card. There definitely are. I did my sheet.
I agree. You'll have your sheet, right? Anybody interested, you get Dawn's sheet, and you'll get a lot more vulnerable favorites out there. So always good. Like I say, it's just as good to know who to bet against as it is to bet on. So that's an important angle.
Yeah, the website's not quite done yet. It will be done next week, but I've had a lot of interest in it, and the people who've received it are happy with it. It is a good way to improve your game because I actually go through each race. You can read my thought process why I don't like these certain horses. I have different catch names for them, like the hot potato horse, you know, those kind of things. So there are certain things that I look at. I was an owner and a trainer and a breeder of horses, of standardbred horses for a long time. I'm pretty good at finding when horses are like dropped down to be for sale, those kind of red flag horses, the for sale sign, you know, those things. So yeah, the sheets have been good. You can actually just jump on Twitter right now until the website's ready at Dawn.
What's the name? Why don't you tell everybody what the name of the website is?
The name of the website, well, because it's still under construction, so I don't want anybody to look at it.
Okay, when it's up there next week, we'll tell everybody what it is, and we'll put a link to it down at the bottom of these videos so people can keep it easy and bookmark it or whatever it is they do to.
Yes, if you saw it right now, you'd be on my okay, but it's not done yet. It's a skeleton, but it will be done for next week. So jump on Twitter at Dawn Lupul, send me a DM if you're interested in the sheets, and I'll send you the details.
Sounds good. I'll stop the show now. So ciao for now, everybody, and then we'll say goodbye quick right off camera.
Here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.